Hey everyone, back again with another deep dive. And this time, we're tackling something, well, a lot of you have been asking about. How does having kids affect relationships long term? Even without kids myself. I've got to admit, I've definitely wondered, and you see the cute baby pics online, but you over here like a full-blown meltdown in the grocery store aisle, and you're just like, what's the real story here?
Yeah.
Lucky for us, we've got our expert here, ready to break down all those research articles and real-life stories you all sent in.
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely complicated. And I think that's part of why it's so fascinating. The research is sort of all over the place, but some interesting patterns definitely pop up. Maybe we could start with something that came up a lot in what you sent, the idea that having kids can actually make the bond between partners even stronger.
Really, that's kind of surprising. We're so used to hearing about all the ways parenting can be, a strain on relationships.
For sure. But yeah, there's definitely another side to the coin. A lot of the research talks about this idea of shared purpose. Like when you're raising kids together, you're kind of building something bigger than yourselves. There's this shared responsibility, the history you're making, and this sense of accomplishment together. It's not just like the practical stuff either. It's this deep emotional connection that can grow from it, witnessing your kid develop all the milestones and, yeah, even the challenges you go through together. It can be incredibly bonding.
Makes sense. There's something so, like, powerful about bringing a new life into the world
Yeah.
and watching them grow up.
And here's another thing that really stood out to me from the stuff you sent. A lot of couples talked about seeing their partner in a whole new light after becoming parents.
Yeah,
Like they suddenly reveal these hidden talents for patience, or they're amazing at calming a crying baby. It's more than just like finding out they're good at certain things. It's seeing their vulnerability, their strength, their capacity for love in ways you just couldn't have imagined before becoming parents. You're seeing each other at your most raw and authentic, and that can be really powerful. Actually, one of the stories you shared, the listener said, they felt a totally new sense of respect and admiration for their partner after seeing them as a parent. They even said it was like falling in love all over again.
wow, that's incredible. It's like having kids sort of cracks you both open,
Yeah.
and you get to see these deeper parts of each other. Yeah, I can definitely see how that would strengthen a relationship. But got to acknowledge the maybe not so cute side of things too. I mean, parenting is hard,
Yeah.
right? Even in the most loving relationships, there are bound to be challenges along the way.
Oh, absolutely. No sugarcoating it. The sleep deprivation, all the demands, how your priorities have to shift, all of that can put a strain on even the strongest couples.
I'm exhausted just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Okay, but seriously, how does this actually play out? Like how do those challenges impact how you interact with your partner? Because it's one thing to say it's stressful, but it's another to see how it affects the dynamic.
Right. Well, when you're sleep deprived, even just a little, your patience is going to wear thin. It's harder to think straight, to communicate well, even to manage your emotions. And then on top of that, couples suddenly have way less time for each other, less time for those casual chats, for romantic gestures, even just to be present with one another. And that is, unfortunately, a pretty good recipe for communication to break down.
Makes sense. And if you're not communicating well, it's got to be tough to work through disagreements in a healthy way,
Yeah.
especially when everyone's running on empty, feeling overwhelmed.
Exactly. And resentment can build up really fast. Like if one partner feels like they're doing more of the heavy lifting, whether it's the childcare, the chores, even the emotional labor.
So we've got this interesting push and pull then. The potential for parenting to bring you closer, but also all the real strains it puts on the relationship, almost like a tug of war. You mentioned earlier that we got some stories from listeners, though. I think those could really help us see how this all plays out in real life. What can you tell us about those?
Yeah. Two in particular really stood out to me. They seem to show those two opposing forces in action. In one, the couple described how having kids actually brought them closer than ever, even with all the obvious challenges.
Oh, that's good to hear. What about the other one?
Well, the second story, unfortunately, wasn't so positive. That couple talked about how much they struggled to communicate and connect after having kids. They felt like they were drifting apart and ultimately ended up separating.
Oh, that's rough. It really shows there are no guarantees when it comes to this, huh? So is there anything we can learn from those contrasting experiences? Like, is there something that sets apart the couples who thrive from those who struggle? I mean, it's not like there's a magic formula, is there?
No magic formula, unfortunately. But there are definitely some things that seem to help with what researchers call relationship resilience. And that's actually something that came up a lot in what you sent me.
Okay, relationship resilience.
Uh,
I like it. What exactly does that mean?
It's basically the ability to bounce back from tough stuff, to adapt to changes, and to keep that strong connection even when things get hard. It's about having the tools and resources, both on your own and as a couple, to deal with all the ups and downs that life throws at you. And yeah, the roller coaster of parenting is definitely one of those. And one of the biggest tools in that toolbox is, you guessed it, communication.
Interesting. So it's not just about talking, it's how you talk.
Yeah, exactly. Couples who can be open and honest about their needs, their frustrations, even their joys, even when it's hard to do. They tend to handle the challenges of parenting better. They're able to work through disagreements, offer each other support, and keep that sense of closeness even when life feels super chaotic.
So it sounds like it's as much about listening as it is about talking, huh? Really understanding where the other person is coming from and being willing to compromise.
Exactly. And that takes practice. It's a skill. It doesn't just happen automatically, especially when you're both sleep deprived and dealing with, a newborn. But it is so worth the effort
Yeah.
because that good communication is the foundation of a strong relationship that can weather the storms.
Communication is key. Got it. But in those real life stories, did those couples give any like specific examples of how they actually did that well? Because, talk it out sounds great in theory,
Yeah.
but actually putting it into practice is way harder.
That's a good point. The couple who felt like parenting made them closer, they really stressed that they made time for these regular check-ins with each other, and not just about logistics, or who's doing which chores, but also about their feeling, any worries they had, even just the small stuff that was making them happy.
Hold on. So they like schedule these check-ins, like actually put it on the calendar.
Yep. They said that without that dedicated time, it was way too easy for those important conversations to just get totally pushed aside. Life gets so busy, especially with kids, so they made a real point of prioritizing it.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
I could see how that would prevent things from like building up and turning into resentment.
Mm-hmm.
What about the couple who, sadly, ended up separating? Did they mention anything they wish they'd done differently?
Yeah, looking back, they said they wish they'd been more proactive about addressing those issues when they were still small. They let resentment build up and basically stopped communicating altogether. They also said they regretted not getting professional help sooner once they realized they were really struggling.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that asking for help isn't a bad thing. It actually takes a lot of strength, especially when it comes to your relationship. Sometimes that outside perspective can make all the difference. So, where does all this leave you, dear listener? We've covered a lot, the joys, the challenges, the communication piece, this idea of relationship resilience. It's a lot to take in.
Definitely. And it's important to remember every relationship is different. What works for one couple might not work for another. There's no one right answer.
Right, so it's not about giving you a set of rules. It's more like giving you some tools and insights that you can use in your relationship. Like
Mhm.
we're handing you a map and compass, but you get to choose where you go with it.
I like that. Speaking of tools, your source material had some practical tips for couples raising kids, things like making time for each other, sharing the load fairly, keeping the romance alive. But I think it's important to go beyond just like listing those tips and instead think about how those concepts actually look in your specific relationship.
Yes, I love that. So it's about personalization, not just like a prescription. Like making time for each other could mean a weekly date night for some, but for others, it might just be 10 minutes of cuddling and talking before bed.
Yeah. Right. It's all about finding what works for you as a couple and actually making the effort to do it. Same goes for communication. Some might like those scheduled check-ins, like that couple in the story, while others do better with more spontaneous conversations. The key is finding a style where both people feel heard.
And then there's the whole sharing the load thing. Having kids definitely adds to the to-do list. It's easy for one person to end up feeling like they're carrying more than their fair share.
For sure. And that's where that open and honest communication is so important. It's about talking about each person's strengths, what they like to do, and coming up with a system that feels fair to both of you. And remember, fair doesn't always mean like 50-50 on every single task. It's more about that overall balance that works for both people.
And then there's the keeping the romance alive part, which honestly can feel impossible when you're dealing with sleepless nights and, diaper blowouts.
I get it. But honestly, even small things can make a big difference. It's about reminding each other that you're not just co-parents, but also partners. A surprise coffee in bed, a little note, even just taking the time to listen to their day. Those little acts of love go a long way.
It's like remembering to nurture the relationship, just like you're nurturing your kids.
Exactly. And it's an ongoing process, not like a one-time fix. There will be times you feel super connected and times where you feel totally out of sync. The important thing is to keep talking, keep making an effort, and remind each other why you fell in love in the first place.
This has been so insightful, honestly. It's given me a lot to think about, even though I'm not a parent myself. Any final thoughts for our listener? Something to leave them pondering as they go on this journey.
It's funny, as we've been talking about all this, I'm starting to think maybe the question isn't really, do kids make relationships better or worse?
Oh,
But more like, how can we be more aware of how we handle both the good stuff and the tough stuff when it comes to raising kids while also taking care of our relationship? It's about realizing it's complicated. It's not like one or the other.
I like that. It's not about trying to force things to go a certain way. It's about being intentional about how you approach it all, knowing there will be hard times, but also amazing moments, and figuring out how to navigate all of that while staying connected as a couple.
Exactly. And that journey is going to be different for everyone. There's no one size fits all when it comes to parenting or relationships. It's about finding what works for you two and being open to changing things up along the way.
So it's this lifelong thing, huh? Learning and growing and supporting each other through the ups and downs. And sometimes that might even mean like reaching out for help from others, therapists, support groups, even just friends and family who can offer new perspective.
For sure, asking for help is a good thing, not a weakness. It's okay to admit you need support.
Right.
We're all in this together, right? Figuring out this crazy world of parenthood.
Well said. I think our listener has a lot to think about after this deep dive. Maybe even some new questions to talk about with their partner. It's not about having all the answers. It's about starting that conversation and continuing to learn and grow together.
And hopefully finding those moments of joy amidst all the chaos. Because at the end of the day, that's what really matters.
Absolutely. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive. But the learning never really stops, right? Keep exploring these questions. Keep talking with your partner. And remember, you're not alone on this amazing journey. Thanks for diving deep with us.